When people say we need to strengthen voting rights, people go, what? What's the problem with voting rights? People can vote. What's the problem? What are we talking about? You're gaslighting us. These are the people that don't understand how this shit works. Joe Biden gave a speech today. His first State of the Union, Johnson. So we're going to talk about that because we should. Now, I already know there's some people that don't want to talk about it. They're like, Tim, I don't care about it. I understand. Not the show for you. But let me make this observation. In order to push back on the president, you should do so for more than just one point of don't like him. Yeah, you got to sit through the stuff to know what you don't like so that you can speak intelligently, so you can articulate exactly what it is you have beef with. I have to be able to articulate a point of view on President Biden that is based in actual policy, actual what he's talking about, actually what's happening.
Just Vladimir Putin sought to shake the very foundations of the free world, thinking he could make it bend to his menacing ways. But he badly miscalculated. He thought he could roll into Ukraine and the world would roll over. Instead, he met with a wall of strength he never anticipated or imagined. He met the Ukrainian people. And President Zelensky, to every Ukrainian, their fearlessness, their courage, their determination literally inspires the world. Groups of citizens blocking tanks with their bodies. Everyone from students to retirees to teachers turned soldiers defending their homeland. And in this struggle, President Zelensky said in his speech to the European Parliament, light will win over darkness. The Ukrainian ambassador to the United States is here tonight, sitting with the First Lady. Let each of us, if you're able to stand and send an unmistakable signal to the world of Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Wow. Okay. The first thing that jumped out on me on this is how America picks and chooses who the heroes are and who the villains are. And I don't mean that about Russia. This is not Russia related. This is how Biden has chosen to frame Ukrainians. He says Ukrainians, Russia thought they would have a pushover. Putin thought he would have a pushover, and he ran into a wall called the Ukrainians. A wall of strength he never could have imagined. Okay, so if the wall of strength is so formidable, why all the coverage? If the wall of strength in the Ukraine is so formidable, why are we involved in this? Why are we talking about this? Why are we moving on? They got this, Johnson. I'm just saying, that's what Biden said. You don't think there are other Americans who are sitting back going, okay, you just said they're good. You just said the Ukrainians are good. They're standing up, they're strong, they're a wall of strength. Putin never could have planned for this. So what the hell is going on, Johnson? Why are we, every 2 seconds, hearing about, Democrats are asking me to give Ukrainians money? I got an email today. Give Ukrainians money. I'm trying to understand it. Biden just sent them money. The other thing that's kind of interesting is he said that citizens are blocking tanks. The citizens of the Ukrainians are standing up, and I'm not taking that from them. Maybe they are doing some heroic acts. And I'm going to give them props for that. Damn it, I'm going to give them more than props. I'm going to clap for that. Clap for people fighting for themselves. Clap for people standing up for themselves. Clap for the people with courage. I'm not being facetious either, man. Clap for that shit. That's real. Here's my point, though. Just suppose this to the narrative that was painted about the Afghans. Oh, we're going to talk tonight. See, you don't want to talk. We're going to talk tonight, Johnson. We're going to talk. What good is tuning into independent media if they sound just like corporate media? What good is tuning into independent? What good is calling someone independent media when they talk just like, sound just like, cut the sound down, the miles move the same, everything's just like corporate media? I'm not informed enough to discuss this? Look, I remember when the Afghans were talked about, they were fleeing. They turned tail and ran away from ISIS, the rebels. After all that we invested, they just buckled. They got slaughtered, Johnson. But the narrative was different. I saw Ukrainians leaving. Almost 500,000 Ukrainians have already left Ukraine. 500,000. Trains, planes, automobiles. The Indians, the Africans, having a hard time getting out. They're prioritizing the Ukrainians, the white Ukrainian-looking people, to get them out. Students, workers of a darker complexion are having a problem getting out. It's either, now you're not exactly sure who's the problem, man. They're like tossing the ball of suppression and, oppression at each other. Some say it's the Ukrainians not letting them cross the border to leave, and some say it's the Polish not accepting them in. Maybe that'll all come out in the wash, but the point is that people are leaving, Johnson. But listen to the narrative. All I want you to do, this is not about right or wrong. War is bad. Full stop. War benefits war profiteers. War benefits war profiteers. War benefits arm manufacturers. War benefits corporations. Wars benefit countries seeking to plunder other countries' resources. War is bad. We've already concluded that. If you are new to the show, we've already decided this is bad. We're gone beyond the rudimentary, very basic, that people should not attack one another. This goes without saying. You're on a channel of someone who is a humanitarian. But we go deeper than that. Listen to the articulation of Joe Biden's words surrounding the formidable, courageous, battle-tested, strong Ukrainians and the weak, feeble, yellow-bellied, cowardly depiction of the Afghans. You don't remember that? Go back and look at the footage.
American resolve matters. Putin's latest attack on Ukraine was premeditated and totally unprovoked. He rejected repeated efforts at diplomacy. He thought the West and NATO wouldn't respond. He thought he could divide us at home, in this chamber, in this nation. He thought he could divide us in Europe as well. But Putin was wrong. We are ready. We are united. And that's what we did. We stayed united. We prepared extensively and carefully. We spent months building coalitions of other freedom-loving nations in Europe and the Americas, from America to the Asian and African continents, to confront Putin. Like many of you, I spent countless hours unifying our European allies. We shared with the world in advance what we knew Putin was planning and precisely how we would try to falsify and justify his aggression. We countered Russia's lies with the truth. And now that he's acted, the free world is holding him accountable, along with 27 members of the European Union, including France, Germany, Italy, as well as countries like the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and many others. Even Switzerland are inflicting pain on Russia and supporting the people of Ukraine. Putin is now isolated from the world more than he has ever been. Together, along with our allies, we are right now enforcing powerful economic sanctions. We're cutting off Russia's largest banks from the international financial system, preventing Russia's central bank from defending the Russian ruble, making Putin's $630 billion war fund worthless. We're choking Russia's access. We're choking Russia's access to technology that will sap its economic strength and weaken its military for years to come. Tonight, I say to the Russian oligarchs and the corrupt leaders who bilked billions of dollars off this violent regime, no more. The United States, I mean it. The United States Department of Justice is assembling a dedicated task force to go after the crimes of the Russian oligarchs. We're joining with European allies to find and seize their yachts, their luxury apartments, their private jets. We're coming for your ill-begotten gains. And tonight, I'm announcing that we will join our allies in closing off American airspace to all Russian flights, further isolating Russia and adding additional squeeze on their economy.
I can't help but think about how everything he's saying, he could be saying to himself. Everything that he's saying, it's almost like, as I look into the room of people that are clapping, I can't help but think about how great their acting skills are. Hey, look, let's be clear. I got to say this. Let's be very clear, Johnson. I'm not defending Putin. I'm saying America is guilty of pretty much everything that he listed. Ill-begotten gains. You mean like plummeting or plundering countries that we invaded and giving them back a portion of it in compens? You know, giving them back pennies on the dollars to help them rebuild after we've plundered billions. And there's so much talk about money, it really seems that this is all about money. Listen to him talk about sanctions and pulverizing the economy. This is why I always say that war is never a benefit to the people. Who's going to suffer? You think Putin's going to really suffer? Who's going to suffer here? The people, the Russian people are going to suffer. As on all war, that's who suffers. The people suffer. We're ready to confront Putin. Putin was unprovoked. I wouldn't say it was unprovoked. It's an issue between Russia and Ukraine for a decade, if not more than a decade. I think Ukraine is just caught in the middle of a proxy battle between the United States and Russia, trying to keep Russia limited access to oil and trying to keep our access open, and then implanting NATO, and we're right back at it, man, Johnson. Crimes of the oligarchs. Sometimes I just wonder, man, how many people are just really buying this? I guess a lot of people are buying it. They listen to me and being a voice of dissent and call me a Russian sympathizer. They would not for a second want to even question, like, what is Biden even talking about with the crimes of the oligarchs? What's the crime of the oligarch? You mean invading countries like we've done? Seizing their yachts and their apartments. Ill-gotten gains. Hey, I'm not saying you shouldn't seize ill-gotten gains. Who gives you the moral authority to do so? You mean steal. You mean steal from other people. Right? So basically, we're talking about war. We're talking about gang warfare. That's all we're talking about. We're talking about one gang against another gang, and a gang that has other gangs. And that gang is NATO, and that gang is the coalition forces. And this is how you get to World War III. If you want to get to World War III, this is one way you get to it. You cut off a person's means to eat, and that's akin to killing them. And if you are killing someone, they have a tendency to fight for their lives. And when they fight for their lives, they don't want to be the only one that dies. Now, just when that sounds about as dire as it could possibly sound, listen to Joe Biden, who just talked really tough, pull it back.
But let me be clear. Our forces are not engaged and will not engage in the conflict with Russian forces in Ukraine. Our forces are not going to Europe to fight Ukraine, but to defend our NATO allies in the event that Putin decides to keep moving west. For that purpose, we have mobilized American ground forces, air squadrons, ship deployments to protect NATO countries, including Poland.
Pause. Let's rewind this a little bit, Johnson. Remember, everything in this speech is there for a reason. He already talked about how Ukraine is doing such a great job standing up for themselves, and now here we go. One more time.
But let me be clear. Our forces are not engaged and will not engage in the conflict with Russian forces in Ukraine. Our forces are not going to Europe to fight Ukraine, but to defend our NATO allies in the event that Putin decides to keep moving west. For that purpose, we have mobilized American ground forces, air squadrons, ship deployments to protect NATO countries, including Poland, Romania, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. And as I've made crystal clear, the United States and our allies will defend every inch of territory that is NATO territory with the full force of our collective power. Every single inch.
He just said Russia was unprovoked, Johnson, and then he says, we will defend NATO territory, every inch of NATO territory. What is this all about then? I said it before, some people said, no, it's not about NATO. If it's not about expanding NATO into Russia's backyard, why is Biden talking about we would defend NATO territory? Sounds pretty similar. That's what it sounds like to me. It sounds like it's all a power grab by the U.S. and Ukrainians caught in the middle of it. Biden made it also very clear he's not going to put any troops into this, but he will go to protect Lithuania. What was the other countries? I couldn't name. I missed a couple of the countries. They were all European countries that he wants to protect. Also couldn't help but guys but to think, wouldn't it be nice if Joe Biden or a politician was able to speak so boldly about black people? Protecting black people from, like terrorists. Domestic terrorists. Discrimination. Wouldn't that be something if there was a politician with the power of Joe Biden? I mean, I talk boldly, but I'm no politician. I don't have any power, really. Hell, I can't even keep people from trolling my show. But I'm talking about, like someone like Joe Biden in a position with a mic to speak as boldly as he speaks for the Ukrainians, to speak that way about black people in America. Hell, even poor people in America. We would fight for Americans to have food on their table. We will fight for Americans to be able to not go bankrupt if they get an illness. No such tough talk. No such impassioned, demonstrative speech making by the president. About you, about I, but about people 1,000 miles away, of course. And not even about joining them, but protecting those around them who may help them. You don't hear this? Joe Biden's talking tough about helping the people that might help Ukraine. He ain't talking tough about helping Ukraine directly. Same old Johnsons. Nothing's changed. I tell you, Johnson, I just think it's hilarious. And the fact that, I don't want to make assumptions, but I feel real strongly about this. I don't got the plethora of corporate media talking about this in the same light that I'm talking about it. With the same intensity, with the same unbridled, brutally honest breakdown. I got them throwing a lot of shade and talking about how great Joe Biden was. How Joe Biden's words were tough talk at the time that we needed it. How compassionate he was. Well, that's not all he talked about. He talked about Russia and he milked it for as much as he could. As much as a distraction as he could make it, he made it. He used this time, which is what wars are really about. It's about distracting us from domestic policies that we could demand of our president, of our country. It's about diverting our attention and putting it elsewhere to some narrative that they create like a movie. Oh, God, I've been hearing about Euphoria. Oh, did you see Euphoria? Oh, it was great. Tugged at the heartstrings. Oh, did you see what happened on the latest Power? Did you see what happened? It's just enough to divert your attention away from what's really going on in the world. Same thing with sports. Oh, and how the Lakers are playing. Did you hear it? Major League Baseball has to postpone their season openers due to contract disputes. Oh my God, what's going to happen? Let's talk about it. News at 9. And these are distractions for what's going on in your life, in my life. So whether you agree or disagree, the fact that you and I might bicker over this falls right into their playbook, and it's perfectly what they want us to do. It needed to keep our eyes off the ball. Let's go to the economy. Yes, Joe Biden talked economy.
We meet tonight in an America that has lived through two of the hardest years this nation has ever faced. The pandemic has been punishing, and so many families are living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to keep up with the rising cost of food, gas, housing, and so much more. I understand, like many of you did. My dad had to leave his home in Scranton, Pennsylvania to find work. So like many of you, I grew up in a family when the price of food went up, it was felt throughout the family. It had an impact. That's when one of the first things I did as president was fight to pass the American Rescue Plan. Because people were hurting. We needed to act, and we did. Few pieces of legislation have done more at a critical moment in our history to lift us out of a crisis. It fueled our efforts to vaccinate the nation and combat COVID-19, delivered immediate economic relief to tens of millions of Americans. It helped put food on the table. Remember those long lines of cars waiting for hours just to get a box of food put in their trunk. It cut the cost of health care insurance. And as my dad used to say, it gave the people just a little bit of breathing room. Unlike the $2 trillion tax cut passed in the previous administration that benefited the top 1% of Americans, the American Rescue Plan helped working people and left no one behind. Folks, and it worked. It worked. It worked. We created jobs, lots of jobs. In fact, our economy created over 6.5 million new jobs just last year. More jobs in 1 year than ever before in the history of the United States of America. The economy grew at a rate of 5.7 last year, the strongest growth rate in 40 years. And the first step in bringing fundamental change to our economy that hasn't worked for working people in this nation for too long.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I love this part, Johnson. This is the part where the people that hate Biden so much, they don't look into any of the facts, and maybe he's got a couple points here. And the people that like Biden overcompensate for what he's done and make it seem like he's the embodiment of Jesus Christ himself. And then the Trump supporters lose their freaking minds and threaten to boycott Starbucks or something. This is what happens. I actually agree with Joe Biden about this because I think that some people need to recognize that Donald Trump's tax breaks were for rich people, not for regular working people. It's why I got the biggest bone to pick with some of the conservative folks who push for, I should say the Trump people. Let's just call them Trump people. The Trump people who, see, I'm not a Biden person. And I'm very clear-eyed about my depiction or my understanding of Biden and my analysis of Biden is not colored by the fact that I don't usually vote for Republicans. I voted Green Party, I voted Democrats. But you give me a better Republican than a Democrat, then I'll consider it. When I say better, I don't mean better people, I mean better policy. But see, that's the thing. These people, they love Trump, but what about the policy? What about the tax breaks? Unless you are a corporate interest, unless you had a corporate interest, unless you were a big money maker, we're talking over $200,000, those tax breaks did not benefit you. They were saying where they benefited those corporations. 90% of Americans did not see a fundamental change in the deductions they could claim based on the Trump tax cuts. 90%. But still, they're upset. You see Mitch McConnell get up out of his seat? He almost popped a vein in his turkey neck. You see Tim Scott get pissed off? Because they know that resonates with people. Forget all this Belarus, Ukraine, Russia talk. Because at the end of the day, this is what people really care about. This is what they came to the dances to hear. Now you're playing their music. Things that affect their pocketbooks. And he's talking about it. High-earning income individuals saw the most benefits from tax cuts made by Donald Trump, bar none. To deny that would be to deny reality. It is what it is. Even those higher standard deductions were not enough to compensate for the amount of exemptions that were cut for working people under the Donald Trump tax plan. These things are factual and actual. In fact, here we go. These are numbers I wanted to make sure I get right. The tax cuts for the corporations went from 35% to 21%. That's why corporations love Trump. And I always understood why the corporations love him so much. The corporations love Donald Trump, not for his rhetoric. They hated his rhetoric. They wanted him to shut up. Stop being so loud and stop being so abrasive. You're making it hard to support you. Because they were looking at the bottom line. The working stiffs that supported Donald Trump got no real material gains from supporting Donald Trump. They just like the way he talked, the way he took on Democrats. They're more interested in Democrats being roasted and Trump smacking up the rhinos than they weren't actually benefiting from his presidency. At least when it came to their pocketbooks. And you can say, well, I did good under Donald Trump. Coincidence. Coinkydink. I did better under Obama. It was just the time of year it was in my life. That was the season for my life. I happened to be working at a Fortune 100 company at the time. Did it much better than I'm doing now. That's got really nothing to do with Joe Biden, though. That has to do with I chose to do this shit. And this ain't about money. Thank God. So that's not where Biden stopped. He continued this conversation. Let's go to voting.
They save lives. The most fundamental right in America is the right to vote and have it counted. And look, it's under assault. In state after state, new laws have been passed. Not only to suppress the vote, we've been there before, but to subvert the entire election. We can't let this happen. Tonight I call on the Senate to pass the Freedom to Vote Act, pass the John Lewis Act, Voting Rights Act. And while you're at it, pass the Disclose Act so Americans know who's funding our election. Look.
One of the things about voting rights that I've noticed is people do not correctly or effectively articulate the real voting rights issues. When people say we need to strengthen voting rights, people go, what? What's the problem with voting rights? People can vote. What's the problem? What are we talking about? You're gaslighting us. These are the people that don't understand how this shit works. Every state has different laws that determine how people can vote and under what conditions they can vote. Similar to what we just experienced with COVID-19, with the mask, with the jab. Every state was its own island, right? You do understand it now because you were pissed about that. So that's perfect. a lot of my conservative friends are very upset about the COVID precautions in their state. It prohibited where they could go. It prohibited when they could wear a mask, when they couldn't wear a mask. It prohibited if they could enter a particular facility, a store, eat indoors, eat outdoors. Gain entry and not gain entry. They were very upset about it. Well, every state has its own rules about voting too, and some of those rules are tighter than other places. And without a National Voting Rights Act, what's happened is that national law, the federal law, has been chipped away and lost its teeth and its power. And it has reverted back to allowing states to make more and more of the decisions. And in some of those places where those decisions are made, there are Republicans. And Republicans are not stupid. Republicans know that a lot of black folks, and Tim Black included, do not vote Republican. So they're making it harder for more black folks to get to the places to vote. If we are the poorest people, once you add, you got to catch a bus. Once you add, you got to be here at a certain time, and the windows start closing about the time that you can be there. If it affects the poorest people, who does it impact? There are people that are watching this show who aren't black, who sometimes take off work because they don't have money, gas money, or bus fare. But you don't understand what I'm talking about when I say they have kneecapped the Voting Rights Act, which make it harder for black people to vote. If you make it harder for poor people to vote, you are effectively making it harder for black people to vote. They're not putting up signs that say no blacks. They're making more obstacles for poor people to vote. They're making the lines longer. If you make the wait times longer, people that have to work at $1 an hour jobs can't take the time off to go. They can't stand in line. If you shut down polling places to make the travel to voting harder, then only people with the best cars or people with their own transportation can go. Not everyone has a driver's license. Some of our older folks have no need. It's harder for them to get to renewals because they don't have transportation to go to the NBA. There is a whole host of reasons, and no one reason gets everyone disenfranchised. We're talking about numbers here. We're talking about around the edges. Just enough to make it harder for just enough people in order to facilitate throwing or giving you an unfair advantage in elections. This is how it works. See, there were laws, going back to the Civil Rights Act, there were laws in certain states like Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas. There were different than laws in New York. Because they were made at the local level by bigots and racists who had a certain ideology. You mean to tell me you think that the same people that were lynching, the epicenter of lynching in Mississippi, had the same laws, local laws, that they had in a place like California? You really think so? But I understand because people don't articulate it in this way. They deliver you this news, this information in the dry manner that some people, not some of you, my people here for a reason. But some people, they gravitate to it. This is because there are credentials behind those commentators, like CNN or MSNBC, or was once on CNN, or budding entrepreneurial aspects to be on CNN, or the biggest independent media in the world, just like MSNBC. But it's not being articulated in a way that people can understand it, so get it here. Understand now. When you trim around the edges, we make it a little bit harder for the most vulnerable people. Those most vulnerable people will not be able to go. You make it more difficult for the most vulnerable people, then you are shaving the numbers. It's that simple. If you had to get together at your house, if you didn't make it on a Saturday, when the people that work Monday through Friday could be there, you'd be shaving some of the people that could be there, right? And if you made it between, the hours of 5 and 7, when some people are still commuting, you would be making it harder for certain people, what? Your working friends, who didn't get off till 7 or 8 at night, to be able to be there, right? Don't you understand how this works? Now, it doesn't take a mathematician to start deciding, what are my friends that first of all have to work, they have to work during the week? Who are those people? The working stiffs. The independently wealthy people are fine, right? It would not take a rocket science to determine who would be more impacted by when you decided to throw your events. And then all would it take Einstein to figure out that it would be different travel arrangements for some people to be there. Maybe they share a vehicle. Someone has to catch the bus. They only have one car. The time that you're making the event during the week, some people wouldn't be able to go because their husband or the wife hasn't had a car to go into town to go to work. And there's no buses running. Are we understanding how basic it is to cut down the number of voters? Have I used enough analogies for you to get this? Or are you still going to be one of those people on Facebook totally not having an understanding at all what I'm saying, who's listening to Marjorie Taylor, whatever her name, Swift, or Candace Owens reject reality to the sound of applause of either bigots or morons, or hopefully most people just don't know. I will hope to say most people just don't know. But if you watch this, and if my people do their job and share this, as much as they share the David Pakmans and the TYTs and the other content, maybe some people will get it. Maybe they'll really understand. Then when we talk about reparations, that's one thing, and that's great. I'm glad you support reparations. But there are other things to support. How do you get politicians in office that help us get reparations? Votes, man. So as much as we want to be a one-track mind, we have to open our minds to more tracks. Got to keep our eyes on at least 48 tracks up here, Johnson. Before I go too far, let's go back. We got a couple more clips. This is about policing.
And other issues that we must face together. I recently visited New York City Police Department days after the funerals of Officer Wilbur Mora and his partner, Officer Jason Rivera. They were responding to a 9/11 call when a man shot and killed them with a stolen gun. Officer Moore was 27 years old. Officer Rivera was 22 years old. Both Dominican Americans who grew up in the same streets that they later chose to patrol as police officers. I spoke with their families, and I told them that we were forever in debt for their sacrifices and will carry on their mission to restore the trust and safety of every community deserves. Like some of you that have been around for a while, I've worked with you on these issues for a long time. I know what works. Investigating crime prevention and community policing, cops who walk the beat, who know the neighborhood, and who can restore trust and safety. Let's not abandon our streets or choose between safety and equal justice. Let's come together and protect our communities, restore trust, and hold law enforcement accountable. That's why the Justice Department has required body cameras, banned chokeholds, and restricted no-knock warrants for its officers. That's why the American Rescue Plan that you all provided $350 billion that cities, states, and counties can use to hire more police, invest in more proven strategies. Proven strategies like community violence interruption, trusted messengers, breaking the cycle of violence and trauma, and giving young people some hope. We should all agree the answer is not to defund the police. It's to fund the police. Fund them. Fund them. Fund them with resources and training. Resources and training they need to protect our communities. I ask Democrats and Republicans.
Way to go, Tony, for pointing this out, brother. Biden sound like Trump. All the stories he could have chose. Oh, he could have chose a story of, I don't know, a Tatiana Jefferson in her room, in her house, watching her nephew shot through her window because someone said her door was open. Amir, Locke, laying on a couch. No warrant for Amir Locke. Wakes up, gets shot by cops. He moved the wrong way. No knock warrant. All these stories. What does he do? He chooses a story. He cherry picks a story of 2 cops killed by some asshole in New York. Criminals who shoot cops are wrong. We know this. That's not a reason to get cops more money. That's a reason to create less criminals and less people who are psychotic, like the guy was who shot those 2 cops. Makes even more case for defunding the police and putting that money other places to deal with these people so that the cops don't have to. That was the other point I wanted to make to my earlier caller. If you have, it's not just defund the police, it's take some police money and create a separate division for the people that respond to domestic disputes or children, issues with kids that can be dealt with separately from the police. Like, everything should not be the cops show up. Cops should not handle everything from a kitten in a tree to somebody off their medication to a bank robbery. Like, there's got to be some things that are broken up into other institutions. You shouldn't just back a brink truck up to a police department and dump all the cash you got and then walk away and say they got it. Not only does it make it that, look, what I'm saying ain't even wrong from a policing standpoint. There's a reason why police are record setters, not just in suicide, but also in domestic violence to their own wives. There's a reason why the depression's so high. There's a reason why cops are more likely to take their own lives or die drinking and driving than they are in the line of duty. There's all these things Biden could have talked about, but he won't.
Like some of you that have been around for a while, I've worked with you on these issues for a long time. I know what works. Investigating crime prevention and community policing, cops who walk the beat, who know the neighborhood, and who can restore trust and safety.
Isn't there something Joe Biden can talk about? My track record. I work with you on the policing. Yeah, we know, Joe. We know you work with us on the policing, Joe. You're the 3 strikes guy. You're the guy who had his name on every piece of law enforcement boosting, black community buckling, mass incarceration piece of legislation on the last 30 years, 40 years. That's you, Joe. We know. Unfortunately, for some reason, other people don't know. Well, unfortunately, I guess not enough Democrats know or gave a damn because we got you anyway. And sitting behind you, we have a cop. And sitting to her right, we have someone who should be in jail for all that Wall Street money. Oh, we're getting spicy tonight, huh? Just keep it at 100. I mean, we could talk boldly about Trump's tax cuts. We could talk boldly about Joe Biden's uppercuts to the black community in the form of policing over the last 40 years. Crime prevention. Let's not abandon our streets. You've already abandoned the streets. What are you talking about? If you were actually trying to help the streets, you know what you do? You throw money into those streets. You put money into the streets for those people. There'd be training programs for those people. Not more cops to lock them up, but more training programs for them to make more money. I know what works. Yeah, you know what works. Vilifying black people and lip service and telling long stories about your father, who is probably turning over in his grave because he knows what kind of segregationist But, buddy, you actually were Joe Biden. I'm sorry, Joey. But these are just facts, Johnson. You ain't got to like them. These are just facts. Restore trust. How do you restore something that was never there? This is total, complete bullshit. From slave catchers to police officers, that's the trajectory. How can you restore trust in that? From slave catchers to police officers. Don't defund the police, fund them. You know, it's also true that that there are Democrats that are getting hit with this every step of the way. They're getting hit with the term, and the people don't give a shit to try to understand what you're talking about when you say defund the police. It's true. It's hard. Look, hey, once people had something in their minds that this is a negative thing that was done, combating that type of messaging is an uphill battle all the way. But when you have at your fingertips all of the corporate media that you can use, don't tell me that the Democrats could not, if they wanted to, turn that messaging around. Erase the negative narrative that was painted by the Republicans and some morons. They could if they wanted to. I'm telling you, folks, and this is just purely my opinion. I believe that the Democratic Party was fine with the narrative being disrupted. They were fine with the inaccurate depiction of what defunding the police really meant. That they really orchestrated it. Just like it was Democrats that said Obama was a Muslim when he wasn't. All's fair in love and war. It's never enough for us because we want equality and we want equity and we want justice. And we got a government that's determined not to give us that shit. And if we think we're going to get it all out of electoral politics, it's just not going to happen. Hate to be the bearer of bad tidings. All right, guys, that's it. That's all. I talked enough. Let's go to phone calls.